10 minutes from now, this hospital will wish it had listened to the quietest person in the room. Dr. Warren Hale did not look up when he slid the white envelope across the conference table. Beyond the glass wall, St. Gabriel Regional Medical Center moved through another ordinary night shift. Phones ringing, carts rolling, monitors pulsing with soft green light. But inside the small office, everything had gone still. Claire Bennett stood across from him in navy blue scrubs, her brown hair tied low at the nape of her neck, her hospital badge resting against her chest. She did not reach for the envelope immediately. Hale folded his hands. Your employment ends tonight. Claire's expression did not change. No anger, no pleading, not even surprise. She simply looked at the envelope, then at the man who had signed it. Because I stabilized the patient? She asked. Her voice was calm enough to make the question feel heavier than an accusation. Hale leaned back. Because you accessed a restricted system, ignored direct instructions, and triggered an alert that could embarrass this hospital. Somewhere beyond the office, an elevator chimed. Claire lowered her eyes to the badge clipped to her scrub pocket. The plastic was scratched from years of use, but her name remained clear. Claire Bennett, registered nurse. Nothing beneath it suggested rank. Nothing mentioned the desert she had crossed, the aircraft she had worked inside, or the people who still remembered her voice through radio static. She unclipped the badge and placed it beside the envelope. The small sound of plastic touching would seem unusually loud. Hale expected an argument. Instead, Claire said, Is Owen Mercer stable? The medical team has him, Hale replied. That was not my question. For the first time, he looked directly at her. Her face held no challenge, only focus. The same steady attention she had shown while the emergency room filled with confusion. Yes, he said after a pause. He is stable. Claire nodded once, picked up the envelope, and walked toward the door. Several nurses watched from the hallway as she emerged carrying nothing but the paper and a worn canvas bag. No one spoke. Some had heard that she had acted without permission. Others had seen the patient improve after she did. Claire passed the central desk, the supply station, and the row of windows overlooking downtown. She was 3 steps from the elevator when a shadow swept across the glass. Then another. A paper cup on the counter trembled, sending a thin circle of coffee toward its rim. The ceiling lights flickered once. A security officer glanced upward as a low mechanical rhythm rolled over the roof, distant at first, then deeper, heavier, impossible to mistake. Claire stopped. She looked at the clock above the nurse's station. 9 minutes had passed since the red military alert appeared on the screen. The elevator doors opened behind her, but she did not step inside. Across the emergency room, every face turned toward the windows as the sound of rotor blades grew until the glass began to hum. Dr. Hale came out of his office, still holding the copy of her termination order. What is that? He asked. Claire kept her eyes on the clock as the minute hand moved forward. That, she said quietly, is the response you were warned about. 3 hours earlier, before the white envelope reached her hands and before the hospital windows began to tremble, Claire Bennett stood at the edge of a quiet pasture 12 miles outside the city. Dawn had not fully arrived. The grass was silver with dew, the wooden fence held the cold of the night, and a thin layer of mist drifted above the ground. On the far side of the field, Echo watched her without moving. The 7-year-old Mustang mare had a deep chestnut coat, a dark mane, and the alert eyes of an animal that had learned to measure every person before trusting them. Most workers at the rescue ranch could not come within 10 feet of her without making her step away. Claire never tried to close the distance first. She opened the gate, walked into the pasture, and stopped 20 feet from a mare. Her dark brown hair was tied low beneath the collar of a practical jacket, and navy blue hospital scrubs showed beneath it. For nearly a minute, neither of them moved. Claire listened to Echo breathe. Echo listened to Claire do the same. Then the mare lowered her head and crossed the wet grass. Claire raised one hand, palm open, and waited until Echo placed her warm muzzle against it. Good morning, girl, Claire whispered. The tension left the mare's shoulders. Claire moved slowly along her side, checking the left front hoof, the muscles above the knee, and the worn leather strap near the halter. One buckle had loosened overnight. She removed a small multi-tool from her jacket pocket and repaired it with the same patience she used when checking hospital equipment. Nothing was too small to matter. Not a weak battery, not an empty oxygen cylinder, not a loose piece of leather that could fail at the wrong moment. Linda Carver, the ranch manager, approached with 2 paper cups of coffee. "She will not let anyone else do that," Linda said. Claire accepted 1 cup. "I'll wait until she agrees." Linda looked at Echo, who remained close enough for her shoulder to touch Claire's arm. Most people call her difficult. Claire ran one hand gently along the mare's neck. Most people confuse fear with disobedience. Linda heard something personal beneath the answer, but she had learned not to ask about the old silver cord wrapped around Claire's wrist or the faded coordinates pressed into its metal clasp. She only knew Claire arrived before sunrise, worked long shifts at St. Gabriel Regional Medical Center, and returned whenever Echo had a difficult day. A distant aircraft crossed the pale horizon. Its sound reached the pasture several seconds later. Echo's ears turned sharply, and her body tightened. Claire stepped into her line of sight without grabbing the halter. "Steady," she said. The mare released a slow breath. Claire matched it. Her phone vibrated inside her jacket. A message from the emergency department asked her to report early because the morning shift was short-staffed. Linda glanced at the screen. Another long day. Claire finished her coffee and placed the cup on the fence post. Probably. She gathered her worn canvas bag, then paused beside Echo one final time. The Mustang nudged the pocket where Claire kept small pieces of apple. Claire gave her one and touched the white mark between her eyes. We'll be back tonight." Echo watched as Claire crossed the yard toward her aging blue pickup truck. High above the tree line, the distant aircraft continued west, carrying a medical crew that neither Claire nor St. Gabriel expected to need before the day was over. Claire arrived at St. Gabriel Regional Medical Center 20 minutes before the time requested, parked her aging blue pickup near the employee entrance, and sat for a moment with both hands resting on the steering wheel. The hospital rose above her in pale concrete and mirrored glass, already bright beneath the late morning sun. From the outside, it looked orderly, predictable. Inside, order depended on people noticing what others missed. Claire stepped out, adjusted the strap of her worn canvas bag, and entered through the staff corridor. The emergency department was already full. Fullness hung. Wheels rattled over polished floors. A child cried somewhere behind a curtain. At the central desk, a young resident named Tyler Brooks glanced at the clock and then at Claire. "Early again, Miss Checklist," he said. 2 nurses nearby smiled without looking up from their screens. Claire placed her bag beneath the desk and began checking the supply board. "The message said you were short-staffed." Tyler leaned against the counter. "We are short-staffed, not preparing for a siege." Claire opened a cabinet and found only 2 sealed airway kits where the inventory sheet listed 6. She wrote the number down. The difference usually becomes clear after it is too late. Tyler gave a small laugh. "You always talk like that, only when someone asks." She moved from station to station, checking oxygen connections, emergency medication seals, portable monitor batteries, and the backup power indicator on the trauma card. Her hands worked quickly, but never carelessly. She did not perform for the people watching. That seemed to bother them more than if she had argued. Near the physician station, Dr. Warren Hale was reviewing staffing reports with a department manager. He noticed Claire testing the defibrillator and frowned. "Nurse Bennett," he called. Claire looked up. "Yes, Dr. Hale. Facilities all ready. Check that equipment this morning. The battery indicator is dropping under load." Hale walked over, his white coat moving sharply behind him. "Then submit a maintenance request." Claire disconnected the unit and attached the backup pack. "A request will not help if someone needs it in the next hour." Hale looked at Tyler, who lowered his eyes to hide a smile. "This is exactly the problem," Hale said. "You treat every routine shift like a field operation." Claire met his gaze without challenge. Routine shifts change quickly, and hospitals have procedures for that. Procedures work best when the equipment does. The department manager stopped writing. The air around the desk tightened. Hale lowered his voice. "Your role is to follow the chain of command, not question every system in the building. Claire glanced toward the trauma rooms, where an orderly was replacing an empty oxygen cylinder that should have been full. I'm not questioning the system. I am checking it. Hale studied her for a long second, then stepped closer. You're still on probation here. Quiet competence is useful. Quiet resistance is not. Claire said nothing. She returned to the cart, secured the replacement battery, and pressed the test button. The machine powered on immediately. A clean tone sounded. Tyler shook his head. You really think disaster is waiting around every corner, do you not? Claire closed the compartment. No, I think people are. At that moment, a distant siren rose beyond the ambulance bay. One became two, then three. The charge nurse picked up the incoming call, and her expression changed. Motor vehicle collision, she announced. One critical patient. No confirmed identification. Estimated arrival for minutes. Claire turned toward the glass doors before anyone else moved. Far beyond them, above the city skyline, a military helicopter crossed the sky from west to east. The sound was faint, almost lost beneath the sirens, but Claire heard it. Her eyes followed the aircraft for 1 second longer than necessary. Then she pulled on a pair of gloves and walked toward Trauma Room 2. Covered bay. 2 paramedics moved quickly through the entrance with a man lying motionless beneath a gray thermal blanket. Claire was already beside Trauma Room 2, one hand on the rail and the other reaching for the portable monitor. Male, approximately 38 years old, the lead paramedic reported. Single vehicle collision on the westbound interstate. He regained consciousness twice during transport, but his responses were confused. No wallet, no phone, no medical bracelet. Dr. Tyler Brooks stepped into position at the head of the bed. Blood pressure, 100/60 and falling slowly. Heart rate is 94. Oxygen level looks acceptable, but his breathing pattern changed about 3 minutes ago. Claire looked at the man before she looked at the monitor. His face was pale beneath the fluorescent lights. His breathing was controlled, almost deliberately so, but every fourth breath arrived a fraction too late. His right hand rested open against the blanket while the left remained slightly curled. "Sir, can you hear me?" Tyler asked loudly. The man did not respond. Claire moved closer. "Do you know your name?" His eyelids shifted. A faint sound escaped him, too soft for the others to understand. Claire leaned near enough to hear without crowding him. "Mercer," he whispered. "Owen Mercer?" she asked. His eyes opened for less than a second. "Nightingale." Claire became perfectly still. Tyler was already ordering routine scans and laboratory tests. He did not notice the change in her face. Claire reached for the collar of Owen's jacket, intending only to clear space for the examination, when a thin metal disc slipped from beneath the fabric. It was smaller than a standard identification tag and worn nearly smooth along the edges. At its center, 2 narrow wings curved around an old medical symbol. Beneath them was a sequence of 6 faded numbers. Claire knew the mark immediately. Nightingale section had used it on equipment that was never listed in ordinary inventories. She had not seen one in 11 years. "What is that?" Tyler asked. Claire closed her fingers around the disc before it could swing back beneath the jacket. "An old unit. Marker. Military. Something like that." Dr. Hale entered the room as the first test results appeared on the screen. "What do we have?" Tyler summarized the transport report and pointed toward the monitor. "His readings are not ideal, but nothing explains the level of confusion." Hale studied the numbers. "Then we follow standard trauma protocol." Claire watched Owen's chest rise again. 1 breath. 2. 3. A pause. His fingers tightened slightly against the blanket. She touched his wrist, counted silently, then checked the color beneath his fingernails. "Standard protocol will be too slow," she said. Hale turned toward her. "Based on what?" "His breathing is compensating for something the monitor has not caught yet." Tyler glanced at the display. "His oxygen level is 96%. The number is not the problem." Claire lifted Owen's left hand gently. "This is..." His fingers had begun to stiffen in a pattern she remembered from aircraft cabins, remote clinics, and places where diagnostic machines were often hours away. Hale's expression hardened. "Nurse Bennett, Let the physicians assess the patient. Claire looked again at the faded emblem in her palm. Below the wings, one final line had been scratched into the metal by hand. NCIS, her old designation. Somewhere beneath the steady electronic tones, Owen Mercer drew another delayed breath. Claire placed the marker beside the monitor and met Hale's eyes. Then assess him quickly, she said, because whoever sent him here expected me to recognize that. Dr. Hale picked up the metal marker with 2 fingers and studied it as though it were an object that had no place inside his hospital. Expected you, he repeated. Nurse Bennett, this patient came from a highway collision. You are suggesting someone arrange for him to be brought here because of a scratched piece of metal? Claire kept her attention on Owen. His pulse remained steady enough to reassure anyone who trusted only the screen. His skin told a different story. The color around his mouth had faded, and the muscles along his neck tightened with each delayed breath. I am saying the marker was placed where I would see it, she replied. Tyler looked between them. You recognize the symbol, but that does not make it medically relevant. The symbol is not the medical problem. Claire checked Owen's pupils, then pressed 2 fingers lightly against the inside of his wrist. His body is compensating. The numbers will look acceptable until they do not. Hale set the marker on the counter. We have imaging ordered. We have laboratory work in progress. We have a trauma team following established procedure. Then add a pressure differential scan and prepare the sealed respiratory support unit from emergency storage. Tyler frowned. We do not use that unit for standard trauma care. This is not standard. Hale stepped between Claire and the equipment cabinet. His voice remained controlled, but every word carried authority. You will stop issuing instructions. Claire looked past him at Owen. His right hand had begun to tremble, not from fear or cold, but in a slow, repeated pattern. She had seen that pattern before in aircraft cabins where altitude, pressure, and hidden exposure created symptoms that ordinary monitors explained too late. Dr. Hale, he may have been transported with a sealed field compound, she said. If that container was damaged in the collision, the reaction could be affecting his breathing without lowering his oxygen level yet. Tyler shook his head. There is no evidence of chemical exposure. There is evidence. You're looking for the wrong kind. Hale's jaw tightened. Enough. Nurse Bennett, move to the documentation station. You will record vital signs and nothing more. Could it not move? He needs the specialized filter before the next decline. You are not authorized to make that determination. Then authorize the test. No. The answer landed harder than a shout because Hale gave it without hesitation. Around them, the emergency room continued to move, but the people nearest trauma room, too, had grown quiet. Claire could feel their attention without turning. Hale pointed toward the doorway. Documentation station. Now, Claire looked at Owen's face. For a moment, the fluorescent lights disappeared from her awareness. She remembered dim aircraft cabins, the vibration of metal beneath her boots, and voices waiting for her to decide before the next alarm sounded. She pushed the memory away and returned to the room in front of her. Mr. Mercer, she said softly, leaning closer. If you can hear me, squeeze my hand once. His fingers closed around hers. Weakly, but deliberately, Claire lowered her voice. Did the container open? His eyelids moved. One squeeze. Hale stared at her. What container? Owen drew in a shallow breath and forced out 2 words. Blue case. Claire looked toward the paramedic equipment bag near the wall. A small strip of blue composite material was caught beneath one of the straps. Tyler saw it at the same moment. His expression changed. Claire released Owen's hand and turned to Hale. You can send me to the desk, she said, but first tell your team to isolate everything that arrived with him. Hale hesitated for the first time. Then a soft alarm sounded from the monitor. Owen's heart rate had not risen. His oxygen level had not fallen. Yet the rhythm of his breathing changed again, and this time the machine finally noticed. Claire reached for the emergency cabinet, but Hale caught the handle before she could open it. Do not touch that equipment. Claire met his eyes. Then open it yourself. Dr. Hale released the cabinet handle, but only after the alarm changed from a soft warning to a sharper, repeated tone. Tyler Brooks moved toward the monitor. Respiratory rate is dropping. Claire was already watching Owen's chest. The pauses between breaths had grown longer, while the oxygen readings still remained deceptively high. The monitor is measuring what reaches the blood, she said. It is not measuring how hard his body is working to keep it there. Hale opened the cabinet. Inside sat a sealed respiratory support unit that most of the department had never used. Which filter? He asked. Claire pointed to the gray cartridge marked for pressure-related exposure. That one. Attach it to the portable system, not the wall line. Tyler reached for the tubing, but Claire stopped his hand before he connected it. Check the valve first. He stared at her. It is sealed. Check it. Tyler turned the valve and found it partially locked. His expression changed. Claire took the unit, corrected the setting, and placed the mask over Owen's face with steady hands. Mr. Mercer, breathe with me, she said. Slow in. Hold. Slow out. His eyelids moved. Claire matched her own breathing to the rhythm she wanted from him, giving him something calm to follow while the room around them filled with urgency. Hale watched the numbers. No change. Give it 15 seconds. Claire placed one hand near Owen's shoulder and counted quietly. At 12 seconds, the tightness in his neck began to ease. At 14, his fingers loosened. At 15, the pattern on the monitor shifted. Tyler looked from a screen to Claire. How did you know? She did not answer. Prepare the isolation cart, she said. Move everything that came from the ambulance into sealed containers. No one opens the blue case material until the military response team arrives. Hale turned sharply. Military response team? Claire removed the metal marker from the counter and examined the faded number beneath the wings. This identifier is linked to an emergency protocol. You said it was an old unit marker. It is both. Owen stirred beneath the mask. His voice was weak, but clearer. Code still active? Claire looked down at him. I do not know. Use it, he whispered. You will not activate anything without hospital authorization. Claire checked Owen's pulse again. Stronger now. More even. The protocol does not require hospital authorization. Everything inside this building requires hospital authorization. Not if the threat began outside it. The words silenced the room. Claire moved to the workstation beside the trauma bed and entered the 6 faded numbers from the marker. The system rejected them. She tried a second sequence, adding the designation Owen had spoken. Again, access denied. Tyler folded his arms. The system does not recognize it. Claire looked at the screen, then at the old metal disc. A memory surfaced, a dark aircraft cabin, a gloved hand passing her the same symbol, and a voice saying the final code would never be written down. She placed her fingertips on the keyboard and typed 3 words. Nightingale. Mercy. Activate. The screen froze. Every monitor connected to the workstation dimmed for 1 second. Then the display turned deep red. A message appeared in white letters. Identity confirmation required. Hale reached for the power switch. Claire caught his wrist, not forcefully, but firmly enough to stop him. Do not interrupt the verification. A low tone sounded. The camera above the screen activated and scanned her face. Claire stood perfectly still. The red display pulsed once, then changed. Nightingale 6 confirmed. Regional Military Medical Response dispatched. Estimated arrival, 10 minutes. No one spoke. Tyler's face had gone pale. Hale pulled his hand away and stared at Claire as though seeing her for the first time. Who are you? He asked. Claire turned back toward Owen and adjusted the mask seal. Right now, she said, I am the nurse keeping your patient stable. The red display remained active beside Owen Mercer's bed, washing the trauma room in a muted crimson glow. Beneath the confirmation message, a countdown appeared and began moving backward from 10 minutes. Claire Bennett did not look at it again. She adjusted the gray filtration unit, checked the seal around Owen's mask, and placed 2 fingers against his wrist. His pulse was more regular now, but the tension in his hand had not completely disappeared. Mr. Mercer, stay with my breathing, she said. Slow in. Hold for 2 seconds. Slow out. Owen followed her rhythm as closely as he could. Dr. Warren Hale stood beside the workstation, staring at the military verification screen. You activated a response without authorization from hospital administration. Claire kept her attention on the patient. The protocol accepted the identifier and confirmed the medical need. That does not answer my question. You did not ask one. Hale's jaw tightened. Behind him, Tyler Brooks watched the countdown reach 9 minutes. Dr. Hale, Tyler said carefully, his respiratory pattern is improving. The specialized filter is working. Hale glanced toward the monitor. That does not justify contacting the military. Owen opened his eyes slightly. They were already nearby. He whispered through the mask. Claire leaned closer. Do not waste your breath. Training flight, Owen continued. West of the city. Claire looked toward the red screen. That explained the arrival estimate. 3 military medical aircraft were not being launched from a distant base. They had already been in the air, conducting regional emergency exercises less than 20 miles away. Hale heard him too. Who are you? He asked Owen. The patient did not answer. His gaze remained fixed on Claire. A second alert appeared on the workstation, indicating that the Military Coordination Center was requesting rooftop access through normal hospital operations. The security telephone rang almost immediately. Nurse Adams answered, listened for several seconds, then covered the receiver. Hospital operations is asking whether they should clear all 3 certified landing pads. Hale looked toward Claire. 3 aircraft. Claire checked Owen's fingertips for color and circulation. 1 will carry the respiratory team. 1 will transport him. The 3rd will bring containment equipment for the damaged case. How could you possibly know that? Because that is how the protocol was designed. The room fell silent. Tyler looked at the old metal marker beside the keyboard, then at Claire's face. You designed it? Claire did not respond. The countdown reached 7 minutes. She turned to Nurse Adams. Tell operations to clear all 3 pads and follow the instructions from military flight control. Nothing bypasses hospital safety procedures. Adams relayed the message. You are giving orders in my department. Claire finally met his eyes. I am preventing confusion before 3 aircraft arrive above it. Her voice was quiet, but no one mistook it for uncertainty. She directed Tyler to record Owen's breathing every 30 seconds, instructed Adams to seal all items from the ambulance, and asked security to keep the blue composite fragment away from the ventilation system. Each instruction was short, practical, and immediately understood. The staff began moving before Hale could object. Through the windows, the afternoon sky remained empty, but a faint mechanical rhythm had begun beneath the ordinary city noise. Claire heard it first. Her hand paused over Owen's pulse for less than a second. 6 minutes remained. Somewhere west of St. Gabriel, 3 helicopters had turned toward the hospital. 5 minutes remained when Owen Mercer's breathing settled into a steadier pattern. The gray filter continued to hum beside the bed, and the monitor no longer sounded an alarm. Claire Bennett watched him through 2 full cycles before removing her hand from his wrist. Keep the portable system connected, she told Tyler Brooks. Do not switch him to the wall supply until the respiratory team confirms the room is clear. Tyler nodded without hesitation. Nurse Adams returned from the telephone. Hospital operations has cleared all 3 rooftop pads. Military flight control is coordinating the approach with the city. Dr. Warren Hale looked through the glass wall toward the nurses' station, where staff members had begun gathering beneath the ceiling speakers. Nurse Bennett, my office. Now. Claire glanced at the countdown on the workstation. Owen still needs observation. Tyler can manage him. Tyler straightened. I can follow her instructions. Hale's expression hardened at the word her, but he opened the trauma room door and waited. Claire checked the mask seal one final time, then looked at Owen. The team will be here soon. His eyes opened slightly. They came because you answered. They came because the protocol worked. She left him with Tyler and followed Hale into the glass-walled office. The emergency department seemed quieter from inside, though the distant rhythm of rotor blades was beginning to move beneath the ordinary hospital noise. Hale closed the door. A department administrator stood near the wall holding a tablet. On the desk lay Claire's personnel file and a white envelope. You accessed a restricted military network, Hale said. I activated a medical protocol attached to the patient's verified identifier. Without permission. The protocol did not require hospital permission. Rooftop access did, and hospital operations approved it. Hale looked briefly toward the administrator, who lowered her eyes. You still acted after I told you to stop. Claire remained standing. Stopping would have placed the patient at risk. That is your interpretation. His breathing improved after the intervention. That does not erase the violation. Outside the office, a security officer raised his radio as another message arrived from flight control. For minutes remained. Claire could see Tyler through the glass, checking Owen's breathing exactly every 30 seconds. Dr. Hale, she said, you can review my actions after the patient is transferred. I am reviewing them now. He opened the personnel file. Your employment record identifies you as a registered nurse. It does not mention military command authority, classified systems, or the fact that 3 aircraft respond when your face is verified. Claire's expression did not change. My civilian nursing record is complete. Your history is not. My history was not required for the position. Hale slid the white envelope across the desk. Your employment ends tonight. The administrator inhaled softly, but said nothing. Claire looked at the envelope, then through the glass at Owen. Is he stable? Hale folded his arms. The medical team has him. That was not my question. He followed her gaze. Tyler adjusted the filter and gave Claire a small nod. Halit. Yes, he is stable. Claire unclipped her badge and placed it beside the envelope. The sound of plastic touching would seem louder than it should have been. She picked up the envelope, opened the door, and walked toward the nurse's station. No one spoke as she collected her worn canvas bag and spare stethoscope. 3 minutes remained. The ceiling lights trembled faintly as the first helicopter entered the hospital approach pattern. A paper cup rippled on the counter. Claire moved toward the elevator, but before she reached it, the rooftop landing lights activated through hospital operations. Security radios filled with coordinated instructions. Then a broad shadow crossed the emergency department windows. Every face turned upward. Claire looked at the clock. 2 minutes remained, and the sound above. St. Gabriel was no longer distant. The first helicopter passed directly above the emergency department, and the glass walls shuddered beneath the weight of the rotor wash. Papers lifted from a nurse's station. Identification cards swung against their clips. The elevator doors opened in front of Claire Bennett, but she did not step inside. A security officer raised his radio and listened as hospital operations confirmed that the first aircraft had landed on the western pad. The second was 30 seconds behind it. The third was circling for final approach. Dr. Warren Hale came out of his office holding a copy of the termination notice. You are not leaving until I understand what is happening on my roof. Claire kept one hand on the strap of her canvas bag. The respiratory team is arriving for Owen Mercer. 3 aircraft for 1 patient. 1 carries the specialized medical team. 1 is configured for transport. 1 carries containment equipment for the damaged case. Hale stared at her. You knew all of that before they arrived. I knew what the protocol required. A second helicopter descended overhead, deeper and louder than the first. The ceiling lights flickered once. Nurse Adams stepped out of trauma room 2 and approached Claire. Owen is stable, but he keeps asking whether the team has landed. Claire looked toward the room. Through the glass, Tyler Brooks stood beside the bed, checking the filter and recording each breathing cycle. Tell him the first team is here. Adams hesitated. He said they would only respond if you were still authorized. Claire's expression tightened for less than a second. The system answered that question. The hospital operations display changed, showing all 3 rooftop pads occupied or reserved. Staff members gathered near the windows, careful not to block the hall. No one laughed now. No one called Claire overly cautious. The rooftop access indicator turned green, and the elevator beside her began moving downward from the top floor. Who are they coming to see, Claire? She met his eyes. The patient. That is not the whole answer. It is the part that matters. The elevator floor. Numbers descended one by one. 12, 11, 10. The third helicopter settled onto the roof, and the combined rhythm of all 3 aircraft filled the building like a distant storm. Claire remained still, but her breathing changed, becoming slower and more deliberate. The sound carried memories she did not invite back. Narrow cabins, secured equipment, gloved hands, and voices waiting for her instructions in places where delay could not be corrected. She pressed those memories down and focused on the steady green line visible through Owen's window. 7, 6, 5. Tyler looked out from trauma room 2 and gave her another small nod. Owen was still stable. 3, 2, 1. The emergency department fell silent. The elevator doors opened. A tall man in a dark military flight uniform stepped out first, silver visible at his temples, followed by 2 military medical officers carrying sealed equipment cases. He scanned the room once, ignored the administrators, ignored security, and walked directly toward Claire. Dr. Hale moved as if to introduce himself, but the officer raised one hand without looking away from her. He stopped 3 feet in front of Claire, came to attention, and saluted. Nightingale 6, Colonel Marcus Vance said. Signal received. Claire set down her canvas bag. Every person in the emergency department watched as the quiet nurse they had dismissed returned the salute with the precision of someone who had never truly forgotten who she had been. The man held his salute while the 2 medical officers moved past him toward trauma room 2. Claire stood beside the open elevator with a white envelope still in one hand and her canvas bag hanging from the other shoulder. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she set the envelope on the nurse's station and returned the salute with a movement so precise that every person in the emergency department understood it had been practiced long before she wore hospital scrubs. Colonel Vance, she said. The officer lowered his hand. Time had added silver to Marcus Vance's hair and deeper lines around his eyes, but his posture remained unmistakably military. It has been a long time, Major Bennett. Doctor. Hale turned toward Claire. Major. She did not look at him. Owen Mercer is in trauma room 2. Respiratory exposure, likely pressure activated. The gray filter stabilized him. His belongings are isolated, including fragments from a blue composite case. Vance gave one short nod. You recognize the pattern. The monitor did not. It rarely does. The medical officers entered the trauma room and began working beside Tyler Brooks and Nurse Adams. They did not replace the hospital staff. They listened to Claire's instructions, confirmed the filter settings, and connected a compact diagnostic unit from one of the sealed cases. Above them, the rotors continued turning, their rhythm traveling through the ceiling in steady waves. A second elevator opened. 4 military flight medics emerged with transport equipment from the first helicopter. Behind them came a technical team carrying protective containers for everything that had arrived with Owen. The third helicopter remained on the roof with its engines running, prepared to carry him to a specialized medical facility once the team declared him safe to move. Dr. Hale watched personnel cross his emergency department with quiet efficiency. No one shouted. No one pushed civilians aside. Every movement had a reason. Colonel, Hale said, stepping forward, I am Dr. Warren Hale, Chief Medical Officer of St. Gabriel. I need an explanation for this federal response. Vance finally looked at him. You received the explanation when your system displayed Nightingale 6. That designation means nothing to this hospital. It means your patient reached the only person within 200 miles authorized to activate the protocol he carried. Hale glanced toward Claire. She's a registered nurse. Vance's expression did not change. She is also the officer who designed the emergency response, now keeping Mr. Mercer stable. Silence spread through the room. Tyler looked through the trauma room glass at Claire, as though replaying every instruction she had given. Nurse Adams placed one hand over her mouth. The security officer lowered his radio. Claire remained focused on Owen. What did the diagnostic unit find, she asked. One of the military physicians stepped into the doorway. Your assessment was correct. The material from the blue case caused a pressure-related respiratory reaction. The patient can be transported in approximately 4 minutes. Claire nodded. Keep the portable filter connected through the elevator. The rooftop pressure shift may trigger another decline. The physician answered without hesitation. Yes, ma'am. Hale looked down at the termination papers in his hand. You never disclosed any of this. Claire turned toward him at last. You hired a nurse. I gave you my nursing record. You allowed us to believe that was all you were. It was all the job required. Colonel Vance studied the badge lying on Hale's desk through the glass office wall, then looked at the envelope Claire had left on the counter. Did something happen before we arrived? No one answered. Claire picked up her canvas bag. The patient is stable. That is what matters. Vance followed her gaze to the elevator, then back to Hale. His voice became quieter. Doctor, she taught entire flight teams how to keep people alive when no hospital was available. You had her standing in yours, and you told her to step aside. Colonel Marcus Vance lowered his hand only after Claire Bennett completed the salute. The two military medical officers continued toward Trauma Room 2 without waiting for an introduction. One carried a compact respiratory analyzer, while the other rolled a sealed containment case beside the stretcher. Claire immediately followed them. Dr. Warren Hale remained near the elevator, still holding the termination notice as though the paper had suddenly become too heavy. Inside the trauma room, Tyler Brooks stepped aside and gave Claire a concise report. Owen's breathing has remained stable for 4 minutes. The gray filter is still connected. No new symptoms. Claire checked the monitor, then looked at Owen himself. His eyes opened when he heard her voice. The team is here, she said. Owen released a slow breath behind the mask. I knew you would answer. Save your strength. The senior military physician connected the analyzer to the respiratory system and studied the results. Pressure-activated inhalation exposure confirmed, he said. The filter prevented further decline. He turned toward Claire. You selected the correct cartridge before the reaction reached the second stage. Claire adjusted the blanket near Owen's shoulder. The delay between breaths gave it away. Tyler watched her carefully. That pattern was not in any hospital protocol I have seen. Vance entered the room behind Hale. It would not be, he said. Major Bennett developed the field protocol for environments where standard equipment could not identify the problem quickly enough. Hale looked at Claire. Major. She did not turn toward him. Owen needs to remain on the portable system during the elevator ride. The change in air pressure between this floor and the roof may affect his breathing. The military physician nodded. Understood, Mom. The title changed the atmosphere more than the helicopters had. Nurse Adams, Tyler, and the nearby staff looked at Claire with a new awareness, but she continued working as though nothing had happened. Vance studied the gray filter, then the old metal marker resting beside Owen's hand. How long has it been since you activated Nightingale? He asked. 11 years. The system recognized you immediately. Systems keep records better than people do. Hale glanced down at the notice in his hand. You never disclosed any military rank. Claire checked Owen's pulse. You hired me as a nurse. My nursing license and civilian record were complete. You allowed this hospital to believe that was all you were. She finally looked at him. It was all the position required. Vance stepped between them, not confrontationally, but with enough authority to end the argument. Dr. Hale, she was not hiding from responsibility. She was choosing where to continue it. The transport team positioned the stretcher for movement. Owen lifted one hand weakly, and Claire placed the worn marker into his palm. Keep this with you, she said. It belongs to the protocol. Owen closed his fingers around it. It belongs to the person who made the protocol matter. Claire gave no reply. The elevator doors opened at the end of the hall, revealing the secured route to the rooftop. As the team began moving Owen toward it, Hale saw Claire reach automatically for the monitor cable, walking beside the patient even though he had dismissed her minutes earlier. Vance watched her, then turned to the silent hospital staff. You are looking at the reason hundreds of medical crews learned how to keep patients alive when help was still miles away. Claire did not look back. Her eyes remained on Owen's breathing as the stretcher entered the elevator and the doors began to close. The elevator carried Claire Bennett, Owen Mercer, and the military medical team toward the rooftop while the monitor continued its steady rhythm. Claire kept one hand near the gray filter connection and watched Owen's breathing through every floor. Colonel Marcus Vance stood beside her, silent until the numbers above the doors reached the roof level. You still watch the patient before the screen, he said. Claire did not look away from Owen. The screen cannot tell you what it has not learned yet. The doors opened to bright afternoon light and the powerful sound of 3 helicopters resting on separate landing pads. Medical crews waited behind marked safety lines while the rotor blades turned overhead. The transport team moved Owen toward the center aircraft, protecting the respiratory equipment from a wind. Claire walked beside the stretcher until the flight physician confirmed every connection. "Breathing remains stable," he said. "We are ready for transfer." Claire checked Owen's face one last time. "Keep the filter in place until the receiving team completes the second exposure test." "Yes, ma'am." Owen lifted his hand slightly from beneath the blanket. "You should come with us." Claire shook her head. "You have the team you need. The team came because of you." She leaned close enough for him to hear her above the aircraft. "Then make their flight worthwhile and get home." A faint smile crossed his face before the crew guided the stretcher into the helicopter. Vance remained beside Claire as the side door closed. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The sound of the engines carried memories that St. Gabriel could not see. Narrow cabins, limited equipment, long hours spent keeping people stable while weather closed every route around them. "They deserve to know," Vance said. Claire watched the medical crew complete the final checks. "They deserve to know how to treat the next patient." "That is not what I meant." "I know." Vance looked through the rooftop windows toward Dr. Warren Hale, Tyler Brooks, Nurse Adams, and the staff gathered inside. Nightingale section was not built around aircraft or clearance codes. It was built around you refusing to accept that distance should decide who survived. Claire's expression remained composed, but her fingers tightened around the strap of her canvas bag. "It was built by a team you carried after the program ended." She lowered her eyes. "Not all of them came home able to continue." Vance nodded. "Some retired. Some transferred. You were the last person authorized to activate the full protocol." The first helicopter began lifting from the rooftop, carrying Owen toward the military medical center. Claire followed it with her eyes until it cleared the building. Through the glass, Hale approached slowly. "Major Bennett," he said when the rooftop door opened. "I did not understand who you were." Claire turned toward him. "You understood my job. You decided my voice did not matter." Hale looked down at the termination notice still folded in his hand. "I was wrong." "You were certain," she said. "That is more dangerous." The words were quiet, but no one behind him moved. Vance checked a message on his secure device. "Owen remains stable in flight." Claire's shoulders eased for the first time since the ambulance arrived. She looked toward the departing helicopter, then back at the hospital staff. "Good," she said. "Then Nightingale still works." By the time the second helicopter lifted from the roof, the emergency department had begun moving again, but nothing felt ordinary. Dr. Hale asked Claire to wait in the conference room while the hospital board joined through a secure video call. She agreed only after Colonel Vance confirmed that Owen Mercer had arrived safely at the military medical center. Hale entered carrying the termination envelope, but this time he did not place it between them. He tore the document in half and set the pieces aside. "Your dismissal is withdrawn," he said. "The board wants you reinstated immediately." Claire sat across from him, her canvas bag resting near her feet. "You cannot undo what happened by removing a piece of paper." "Hale nodded slowly." "I know." Behind him, the board members waited on the screen. One of them began speaking about policy reviews, public statements, and the value of Claire's experience. Claire listened without interruption. When the woman finished, Claire placed both hands on the table. "I will return under 3 conditions." Hale glanced toward the screen. "Name them." "First, any nurse, technician, paramedic, or support employee who identifies a credible danger must be heard before rank decides the answer." No one objected. "Second, no employee will be punished for requesting a second assessment when a patient's condition does not match the monitor." Hale lowered his eyes. "Agreed." "Third, emergency decisions will be reviewed according to patient outcome and available evidence, not the embarrassment they may cause the hospital." The room stayed silent for several seconds. Then the board chair said, "Agreed." Claire stood. Hale followed her toward the door. "I owe you more than an apology." She paused with one hand on the handle. Then give the next quiet person more than you gave me. That evening, Claire drove 12 miles beyond the city as the last sunlight stretched across the fields. The old blue pickup rolled to a stop beside the rescue ranch, and Echo was already waiting near the fence. Claire opened the gate and stepped into the pasture. The Mustang approached slowly, her chestnut coat glowing copper beneath the fading sky. Claire removed the hospital badge from her pocket. Hale had returned it before she left, along with a new card granting her authority to train the emergency staff. She studied her name for a moment, then slipped it back into her jacket. Echo pressed her muzzle against Claire's shoulder. "It was a long shift," Claire whispered. The mare released a warm breath and stood beside her while distant mechanical sound crossed the horizon. One of the helicopters was returning west, no more than a dark point above the trees. Echo lifted her head, but she did not retreat. Claire rested a hand against the white mark between the mare's eyes. "Steady." They watched together until the aircraft disappeared. The next morning, Claire returned to St. Gabriel before sunrise. Tyler Brooks was already checking the emergency cart. Nurse Adams was testing the backup oxygen system. Dr. Hale stood nearby holding a new review form titled Frontline Safety Concern. No one called Claire Miss Checklist. No one asked why she was checking equipment that had already been checked. They simply made room for her at the station. Claire set down her canvas bag, examined the first battery indicator, and began the work again. She had not raised her voice. She had not demanded a ceremony. She had only refused to let silence become permission to ignore what mattered. Respect had arrived with the helicopters, but it remained because she had earned it long before anyone looked up.